August 7, 1944, the French countryside burned beneath the morning haze. A single P-47 Thunderbolt broke through the clouds above Mortain, its Pratt & Whitney engine howling at full throttle. Below, a column of German armor wound through a narrow valley, Panthers, half-tracks, fuel trucks, moving fast to counterattack the Allied breakout from Normandy. The pilot, call sign Red Leader, had been ordered home minutes earlier after a failed reconnaissance sweep. But as he banked east, sunlight flashed off steel columns below. He dropped to treetop height, 8.50 caliber Brownings armed and ready. The ground came alive, black smoke, muzzle flashes, frantic radio chatter. What began as a simple observation flight was about to become one of the most devastating solo strikes of the war. And as the Thunderbolt dived into the valley, the pilot whispered the words he'd trained for guns hot. By August 1944, the Western Front had shifted from the beaches of Normandy to the bocage fields of northern France. The Allies had broken out from Saint-Lô under Operation Cobra, shattering German lines that had resisted for nearly 2 months. What followed was chaos, a crumbling Wehrmacht retreating east while Allied divisions surged forward across open ground. To maintain the momentum, the U.S. Army needed constant air support. That job fell to the 9th Air Force, whose P-47 Thunderbolts had become the backbone of tactical air power in Europe. Originally designed as high-altitude escort fighters, the rugged Thunderbolts were reimagined as fighter-bombers, capable of carrying a full ton of ordnance, bombs, rockets, and ammunition for 8-wing mounted Browning machine guns. The Germans called them Jabos, low-flying terrors that appeared without warning, strafing roads, fuel depots, and convoys with terrifying precision. Allied troops came to call them flying tanks. Their armor-plated cockpits could take hits that would destroy most other aircraft, and their radial engines were nearly impossible to kill with small-caliber fire. By early August, American and British ground forces had pushed deep into German-held territory near the town of Argentan. The encirclement of the Falaise pocket was closing, and every surviving German Panzer formation was desperate to escape east. For the Allies, air superiority was total, but on the ground, scattered German armored columns still posed a deadly threat. One ambush could stall the advance. That's where the Thunderbolts came in. They were the eyes, ears, and sudden fists of the Allied advance, and on this day, one pilot flying alone would prove just how decisive a single aircraft could be. The 405th Fighter Group, operating out of a forward airfield near Saint-André de l'Eure, had launched early that morning under orders to disrupt any German retreat routes south of Falaise. Their mission plan was simple: sweep, observe, and report. Precision strikes were secondary. Ammunition and fuel were rationed tightly that week, with maintenance crews working around the clock to keep the Thunderbolts flying in the heat and dust. Among those pilots was Lieutenant Colonel Robert Duke Johnson, a veteran with over 90 combat sorties. Known for his calm under pressure, Johnson had earned a reputation for staying on target even while taking fire. His Thunderbolt, marked with white invasion stripes and the call sign Red Leader, carried 2 500-pound bombs, 10 rockets, and a full load of .50 caliber ammunition. Shortly before noon, Johnson's flight was ordered to recon the Mortain-Argentan corridor, where American ground forces reported enemy armor regrouping for a counterattack. Visibility was patchy, low clouds, smoke from burning villages, and intermittent ground haze from artillery shelling. As Johnson broke formation to investigate movement near a wooded valley, what he saw below stunned him. A long German armored column, Panthers, Stu-GS half-tracks, fuel trucks, was snaking eastward in full daylight. They were attempting to reach Falaise before the pocket closed. Protocol dictated radioing the sighting and waiting for a coordinated strike. But every minute meant more distance for the German armor and less chance for Allied troops to trap them. Johnson's decision came fast, born of instinct and experience. He would strike alone. The next moments would test not only his aircraft, but the doctrine of tactical air power itself. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe for more real WW2 missions like this one. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt was never built to be elegant. It was built to survive. Weighing nearly 8 tons fully loaded, the Jug was the heaviest single-engine fighter of the war. Its sheer bulk came from necessity. A massive 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, self-sealing fuel tanks, and layers of armor surrounding the pilot's cockpit. What it lacked in grace, it made up for in resilience. At low altitude, that power turned the Thunderbolt into a flying anvil. It could dive faster than almost any aircraft of its time, over 400 miles per hour, and pull out safely even under extreme G-forces. Its armament was devastating. 8 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns, capable of firing 100 rounds per second in total. Each burst could shred steel plating, puncture fuel tanks, or ignite ammunition stores. By 1944, P-47 squadrons had rewritten the book on close air support. Pilots operated like mobile artillery, orbiting above advancing troops and striking the moment radio calls came in. They learned to identify German camouflage patterns, recognize engine signatures from altitude, and predict convoy movements by road network and sunlight direction. Their attacks followed a rhythm: dive, fire, climb, reposition, repeat. But the success of every run depended on precise timing and cold discipline. Too steep a dive risked overshooting. Too shallow meant flak had time to track them. That morning over Mortain, LT, Carl Johnson's decision to dive alone defied every tactical rule in the book. No wingman to split enemy fire, no escort to mark targets. Just one Thunderbolt carrying enough ammunition for less than a minute of sustained fire. Yet, thanks to its robust design and overwhelming firepower, he knew the aircraft could deliver a strike powerful enough to cripple an entire armored column, if executed perfectly. Below him, the German convoy stretched for nearly 2 miles along a narrow country road hemmed in by hedgerows and shallow ditches. Dust trailed from the half-tracks at the front, while fuel trucks rumbled in the center and Panthers guarded the rear. The crews had been marching for hours under sweltering heat, exhausted, confident that the airspace was clear. The Luftwaffe was virtually absent from western France by this stage of the war. Most airfields had been destroyed or captured, and German pilots were struggling with fuel shortages and constant Allied patrols. The men on the ground had grown used to an eerie silence overhead. Many even believed American air cover had shifted north toward Belgium. That illusion shattered the moment Johnson dropped through the clouds. The whine of his propeller echoed through the valley seconds before he appeared. A silver juggernaut descending almost vertically, sunlight flashing off its wings. For the German soldiers below, there was no warning, no chance to scatter or deploy flak in time. Inside the cockpit, Johnson's breathing slowed to a steady rhythm. His left hand gripped the throttle, his right on the firing switch. At 2,000 feet, he toggled the arming switches for bombs and rockets. His altimeter spun downward, and the hedgerows grew sharp in his gun sight. On the ground, gunners scrambled for their weapons. One crew managed to swing a 20 flak gun into position, but it jammed after a single burst. Fuel trucks panicked, swerving into ditches. Tank commanders yelled for camouflage nets to be raised, too late. The battle would last less than 15 minutes, but it would burn itself into the record books. Johnson had chosen to attack not out of recklessness, but because experience told him this was the kind of fleeting chance that never came twice. Johnson leveled his Thunderbolt at treetop height, the altimeter steady at 200 feet. The first pass would decide everything. He lined up his sight on the lead vehicles, 2 Panther tanks and a column of half-tracks grinding up a bend in the road. The hedgerows on both sides trapped the convoy like walls, leaving them no room to maneuver. He released both 500-pound bombs in sequence. The first struck just behind the lead tank, lifting it off the ground in a column of dust and flame. The second exploded near the fuel trucks in the center of the convoy, a perfect hit. The blast ignited the gasoline tankers, setting off a chain of violent explosions that rolled down the road like thunder. Johnson banked hard right, pulling into a steep climb. The shockwave from the detonation rattled his aircraft. He turned for a second run, this time arming his rockets. Below him, the road was chaos, tanks burning, men running, smoke columns merging into one dark wall. He dove again at full throttle, releasing 6 rockets in pairs. 2 struck a Panzer IV, detonating its ammunition storage. Another slammed into a truck loaded with mortar shells, scattering shrapnel in all directions. German anti-aircraft crews finally found their bearings. Streams of tracer fire arced upward from 20 flak guns positioned at the convoy's rear. Johnson zigzagged, cutting through their fire, his canopy flashing with ricochets. At one point, a tracer grazed the wingtip, leaving a smoking streak of aluminum. Then came the roar of the .50 caliber Brownings. He strafed the length of the convoy, walking fire across vehicles, engines, and open troop carriers. Bullets tore through sheet metal, set tires ablaze, and burst fuel lines. Each target erupted into sparks, smoke, and fragments. When he pulled up again, the entire valley looked like it was on fire. Johnson climbed to 1,000 feet, banking sharply to assess the destruction below. The once orderly German column had disintegrated into a nightmare of smoke and flame. Vehicles were overturned or motionless, their crews scattering into the ditches and hedgerows for cover. Yet amid the chaos, a handful of Panther tanks still moved, black silhouettes grinding forward through the burning wreckage, their turrets searching the sky for the attacker they couldn't hit. He came around again, this time from the opposite direction to avoid predictable patterns. The Thunderbolt roared in low, engine vibrating under the strain of full throttle. Johnson lined up his gun sight on the lead Panther's rear armor, the weakest point, and fired a sustained burst. 8 guns spat fire. Tracer rounds tore into the tank's engine compartment, punching through grates and igniting stored fuel. A moment later, the vehicle erupted in a geyser of black smoke. He shifted aim to the second tank. Another burst, another explosion. Machine gun fire raked across infantry who had taken refuge under nearby trucks. A rocket, fragmenting near the road, flung 2 half-tracks onto their sides. The air itself shimmered with heat and debris. Each pass lasted barely 10 seconds, but every second was lethal. Johnson's canopy fogged from cordite fumes as his ammunition counters ticked down. He'd already fired most of his rounds, yet the damage below multiplied beyond imagination. Ammunition trucks detonated, sending shells whistling skyward. A burning fuel truck rolled backward into a ditch, turning the road into a river of fire. By the 5th pass, Johnson's guns were almost dry. He circled once more, watching the German formation collapse completely. Dozens of vehicles burned. Survivors were abandoning their armor and fleeing toward the tree line. He radioed a brief message to command, "Convoy neutralized, returning to base." It was the calmest voice in the middle of an inferno. When Johnson landed at the forward strip that afternoon, ground crews rushed to his Thunderbolt expecting damage. The aircraft bore scorch marks, holes in the tail section, and an oil leak from a near miss, yet it was still airworthy. His armor plate was pitted with shrapnel, his gun barrels blistered from heat. He had fired nearly 2,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, 6 rockets, and both bombs, a full combat load expended in less than 15 minutes. Hours later, reconnaissance flights over the Mortain Valley confirmed the results. The photographs stunned intelligence officers. Over 24 vehicles destroyed, including tanks, fuel trucks, and supply carriers. The road itself was cratered, impassable for retreating German armor. Burned wrecks stretched for almost 2 kilometers, evidence of a single aircraft strike. The official report described the target as a large armored concentration completely neutralized by one Thunderbolt. Johnson's commanding officer simply called it unbelievable. What the photos couldn't show was the silence that followed, a once deadly German counterattack erased from the battlefield in one pilot's daring decision. In the days that followed, the story spread through the 9th Air Force. Pilots passing through the mess tent whispered about the one-man air raid that stopped an entire German column. When confirmation reached headquarters, LT Colonel Johnson was summoned for debriefing. His account was simple, almost understated. He described the target, his attack pattern, and the results, offering no dramatics. Analysts later matched his report with ground intelligence. The convoy he had destroyed belonged to elements of the 2nd Panzer Division, attempting to counterattack American positions near Mortain and reopen the Falaise escape route. His strike had blocked that effort completely, leaving the division trapped and leaderless. The delay helped Allied forces tighten the pocket, encircling tens of thousands of German troops. Johnson received the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest U.S. decoration for valor. But to his squadron, the medal mattered less than the message that one Thunderbolt, flown with precision and courage, could decide the outcome of a battle. The legend of that mission spread quickly, but its lessons went even further. When the war ended, the P-47 Thunderbolt became a symbol of Allied power, not sleek like the Mustang or famous like the Spitfire, but feared for its sheer durability and firepower. It was the workhorse of the sky, and pilots like Robert Duke Johnson proved what that power could accomplish when matched with instinct and courage. Historians later called his Mortain strike one of the most effective single-aircraft attacks of the European campaign. In a conflict measured by mass formations and industrial might, his action reminded commanders that victory sometimes hinged on a single decision made in seconds. Doctrine demanded coordination, but the battlefield often rewarded initiative. For the men on the ground, his thunderous dive meant survival. For the Germans, it marked another step toward collapse, a proof that by 1944, the Allies truly owned the skies. Johnson never boasted about that day. To him, it was simply duty. Yet the wreckage along that French road told a larger truth, that courage, precision, and timing could turn one man and one machine into the force of an entire squadron. His Thunderbolt's guns fell silent, but its echo still rolls across history's clouds.